Hello, good evening, folks. Thank you for joining at 100x Live session. Today we are talking on the current affairs of the so-called virtual strike, Chinese apps ban impact, right? So we'll discuss today on the legality and the impact of so-called this virtual strike by Indian government on Chinese apps. I have my guest Anand Lunia from India Quotient, Pranav Pai from 314 Capital, Uday Sodi, an angel investor, and Ninad Karpe, partner at 100x.vc. So let me just bring my guest on to the live 100x live show. Ninad, Uday, Pranav, Anand. Thank you all for joining us, joining on this 100x live show on this crucial topic, which is on the ban which has happened today, and all of us are trying to understand and decode what's happening across. So, each one of you, please introduce yourself to the audience and talk about the government banning 59 Chinese apps. Some are welcoming the move, some are calling it short-sighted. If you call this decision, that it has come too late. So, what would be your opening remarks? Let's start with Anand. He's currently the most popular trending guy on Twitter as a VC, Indian VC guy. So, let's start with Anand. What's your opening remarks on this government ban?
Yeah. Thanks, Sanjay bhai. If I didn't know you well, I would call your remarks uncharitable. But so, I see. 2013, we started our new fund, India Quotient, and we had one goal, and I've spoken to you about it multiple times. That can we discover a Facebook-like app out of India? Right? If we do 2-3 deals a year, and for next 10-20 years, maybe we'll find, right? And over the years, you face so many challenges, right? People initially used to say that Indian people can't design, they can't do product management, they don't know technology, they don't know AI and personalization required for a social media app. And from then, in 2018, ByteDance actually copied ShareChat pixel to pixel, very, very similar colors also, and launched this app called Halo, right? And started pumping tens of millions of dollars every month behind the app, right? It was a good moment. You felt that okay, somebody's copying us. We are so good, right? And at the same time, it was scary, right? It's like what Snapdeal and Flipkart felt when Amazon launched with Jeff Bezos walking into India on an elephant, right? Like a triumphant big boss, give way to me, right? So, and I
So
don't think our country has fully.
Anand, just for audience understanding, Anand has invested in ShareChat and is an investor in ShareChat through
Yeah,
India
I
Fund.
yes, Sanjay
So he
bhai. So
knows
we
the space much better. Please continue, Anand.
Yeah, we invested in Roposo also, which is very popular on social media right now. So the thing is that it was scary to see that somebody else can come dump money into the business and take away the business that you were trying to build. You identified, and to be very frank, the government of India hasn't really been protective of Indian entrepreneurs. Right? On the contrary, the policy of the government is more like welcoming foreign investment, which is fine. We need the money or wherever it comes from. So, in that stance, I think what's happened is a pure security related thing, right? And trying to use the lens of economic protectionism and anti globalization and free trade. And I'll explain to you why those things anyways don't apply. But the most important thing is this couldn't have happened if there was no security concern. I have a strong feeling that it was driven more by the security agencies and not by the multiple representations of startups that we've been making.
Okay, thank you, Anand. Pranav, if I may come to you and take your views, on this opening remarks. What's your view on the government ban announcement?
I think it's a long time coming, Sanjay. Frankly, I completely agree with Anand. He's right. It's been far too much time where Indian entrepreneurs and investors have both felt like Indian capital, Indian entrepreneurship is not held to the same degree as foreign capital and outside companies coming in. We've all of us have been angel investors. We've borne the horrible regime of angel tax, which is still not fully resolved. We are all unlisted investors in the VC space. We still pay more tax, 27 to 30%, compared to another investor holding the same investment, a similar investment in the public markets for the same time period. They only pay 10%, whereas foreign investors pay a third of that. So we have a lot of issues in India where we don't have parity. And now finally seeing the government taking a bold stance. It may have been for the issue of national security, of course, and that's something that all of us have to recognize and respect. It's time to fall in line when that's the national issue at stake. But the second and third order consequences of this will have some very positive benefits on, hopefully, we have to make it work, on the Indian innovation ecosystem. So it's a double-edged sword, however you look at it. We have to make sure we're out of the way of the sword, and we're there to make sure we take full benefit of the opportunities coming out of this. So I think it's been a long time coming, and we're actually very interested to seeing how the Indian ecosystem now comes together to really take advantage of this. We have to be vocal about the facts. We have to be clear about backing local entrepreneurship, exactly what the Prime Minister says. And again, we have to be more inclusive in how we work together to make everyone win in a positive sum game. It's been negative sum, zero sum for too long. I think a lot of these announcements will allow for new ways of working together, which is also another interesting consequence of such an announcement.
Awesome. Thanks, Pranav. Uday, coming to you, what would be your views and opening remark, Uday?
So I think this is an interesting move, but what we need to see is this is coming under the shadow of all the concerns or the political problems that we are facing at the border. So I think this is in the context of the military issues that we are facing in Ladakh, and we have to see it from that context on one end. So yes. There is a challenge there. However, the concern that I think we all would have is this a one-off symbolic gesture, or is this a strategic move? Is this a directional move, or is this one-off? I think for the startup ecosystem, this is a twin-edged sword. One is this opens up a huge opportunity for Indian entrepreneurs to go out there and build their products. Someone like me who've been in the investment space and angel investment space now for 7-8 years. I've been an investor in about 30-40 startups. I've never touched a consumer startup. I very rarely look at a consumer startup because of this reason, that there is far too much money needed to build a consumer startup, and companies come in with obscene amount of cash and bulldoze the market, just like what Anand said. So what will happen now is the Indian entrepreneurs will probably get a great opportunity to build out consumer products on one side. I think what will happen on the other side is that I would imagine that we would probably lose access to Chinese venture funds and Chinese venture money, and that's the real twin-edged situation that we will face. We'll have to see how it plays out. My first piece would be: is this directional? Is this symbolic? Is this a one-off case? Is it targeted at some pressing some pressure points? And if this problem does get solved, will this pressure be let off, and we'll be back to stage one? So I think one has to watch and wait. I wouldn't really call it out right now. I would say let's watch and wait, because this could have all sorts of ramifications, both for the startup ecosystem and the financial ecosystem around that.
So Uday is more cautious. You are more cautious on a wait and watch mode. Ninad, what's your view on this new happening with Chinese app ban impact? What's your view?
Sure, Sanjay. I will quickly articulate in a short span of time. Let me go back. Traditionally, global powers had something called a soft power, and US always led with entertainment, education. All that was soft power and hard power. India had some bit of soft power with education and a little bit of Bollywood. But little did the world realize that apps are the new soft power. Gone are the days of this soft power. And imagine an app coming to India and having 300 million subscribers within such a short period of time. That's real power, and this is something which the Indian government has realized. It has traditionally, we have had a view, correctly so, that Money is important, FDI is important, and a company investing $1 billion in India is fine. Let's welcome them. But I think now times have changed. One has to be more strategic, and India has done the right thing. It's a bold move. It's a strategic move, and I can lay my bet that other countries will emulate the move, because I don't think many countries have thought that this is a potential which really damages and hits the other country, almost below the belt. If you lose 30% of your subscriber base of a large company which has $110 billion private valuation, it's a huge move. It really hits below. So my view is, this is going to be stay here. Obviously, there's going to be other moves which will happen, but it's bold, strategic, and the world will take notice.
Sure. Pranav, coming to you, the way Ministry of Electronics and IT said that these apps are activities, engaged in activities prejudicial to sovereignty and integrity of India and defense of India, security state and public, and as a public order. Trump has been talking about NSA recently, talking about these apps, China, giving out sensitive information. I mean, typically globally, it has been written about that Chinese apps have 40% share in smartphone apps, right? What's your view? Can we live without it? Do we have an alternative? How will the future go about? And is this really about the security or defense of India?
Good question, Sanjay. And I think I will answer this in two parts. On the security threat, even in the first Modi government at the center, and of course Parikar ji was the defense minister back then, if you remember. And Parikar ji is a big hero to us for all of us who come from Goa. In all of his speeches, when he would talk about what threats India is facing at the national level, if you remember, almost every speech he gave, he would mention China and speak about how this is becoming a priority that as a country we have to take a call on. And unfortunately, we waited for so many years now to finally take a call on whether this is important or not. But it's very clear that all the Chinese apps, all the Chinese hardware, both together, is a persistent national security threat. And I can give you a dozen examples, but maybe the most pressing one that gave me a lot of concern personally was when I heard that the geolocation and geotagging of all the smartphones in the northeast of India was being used to build a live map of how troop activity was moving, because all the Bluetooth and Wi-Fi all sensors being on all the smartphones basically makes for a live map of all the devices that's going past yours, and you can very easily look at which bands of which devices are going past your house and reverse engineer if that's a Indian military vehicle, an Indian military radio, so on and so forth. So all of this is one example, but all of this was happening, and it's not like the Indian security apparatus did not know it was happening. The reports were out there, the ministers knew, but the priority as a nation, do we take a call against this? Do we pass a ruling against this? Do we ban or forbid some of this activity? That never happened. What COVID has done, Sanjay, is it's exposed all of the frailties of a reliance on a country like China to the whole world, right? Whether it's the US, for example, having 45% of some of its most vital antibiotics still coming from China, whether it's so many millions of dollars worth of masks being completely not working when it was sent to Spain, the Czech Republic, and Italy, when China decided to send some aid and relief at the peak of the crisis. Every country is realizing step by step that all of these concerns come together during a time of crisis like this. And a time of crisis, as you know, no government is going to waste it. They're going to make full use of a crisis. Any government in the world, even the US, Trump included, you can see what he's doing. And they're going to pass things that were building up over the last 5-10 years, right? So I'm not surprised this has happened now. What I am surprised by is how quickly it's happened all in one swoop, right? 49, 50 apps in one swoop. That's something that no one expected a government like India's to take. I wouldn't be surprised if there were more bans now on hardware. I've been told that that's something that most of the companies are expecting now. So in conclusion, I can give you a dozen more examples, but security was a concern. It is a concern. And I think India is now going to be the last government to take such a step. Now, to answer your second question, what does it mean for apps? Honestly, my personal opinion is none of these apps are apps we cannot build ourselves.
Yeah.
Given enough time and given enough capital, I am confident in telling you 100%. I'll underwrite the statement that India has enough app developers that can make equivalent apps very, very quickly. I think now, very positively, more capital will concentrate on Indian teams building equivalents. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're much higher quality apps because they'll be built grounds up for India. That's something I think is a big opportunity that I don't think we should waste.
So
Yeah.
that's a great positive note from Pranav. So coming to Anand, what Pranav mentioned about, given enough capital kind of stuff, and we have seen, so according to China's Ministry of Commerce, investments in technology stood out to total investment by China was $8 billion. Do you think India has that appetite to invest in startups with the domestic capital? What's your view, Anand?
Yes, Sanjay. I think it's a very good question about domestic capital, and we hardly participating, right? I mean, if you look at what happened with Flipkart, 1.5 lakh crore company, right? It's a large company. I mean, if Flipkart were listed, for example, it will be probably, in the top 50 Nifty 50 listed company, right? And this company was entirely for the benefit of foreign investors, right? Nobody in India participated except maybe the employees who participated and the founders, right? That's about it. No investors participated. I think what we need to do is, if you earlier people made a point about foreign money having an advantage. Public market, Pranav made a point about public listed investors can get a 10% or a 0% taxation regime. The big problem is that it's much cheaper given angel tax and the tax on capital at 29%, right? It is much cheaper to do for a foreign investor to invest in India. There is hardly any Indian capital. There is one fund of funds which has made life a little bit easier. But I am saying that what is the difficulty in India creating 10 fund of funds who can then on the basis of merit give money to Indian funds, right? It's not very difficult. On the contrary, today you go and put money in Reliance and ONGC, you will get a lower tax regime, which for taking no risk, or in State Bank of India, which are all dividend-paying companies. Whereas you invest in a startup and you pay more taxes also, and you have more harassment from the authorities and income tax and all of that. And then when you want to become a neo bank, the regulators will look at you suspiciously. You want to do insurance, the regulators suspiciously. If you're an e-commerce company, you must be doing something wrong. I mean, authorities have. I mean, and which is why I think that this step, what the government has taken, is a purely security step, right? For anybody who's saying that this has been done for the benefit of the founders, quite the contrary, right? I mean, without capital, what Pranav is saying, we would love to build. We are working hard, but without really solving for long-term capital, most of these companies will end up being built for the benefit of foreign investors, right? And which is sad. The biggest wave in the country where a lot of wealth is going to be built in digital products, consumer products or business products. Most of that wealth will not be captured by Indians itself, right? I mean, where will our people save, right? When you are restricted to saving in a few oligopolies like ONGC and a few banks, there are probably 3-4 banks worth of note in the country. Where do you invest money? Sanjay, another point that I want to make about this principle of reciprocity that we are forgetting, right? I mean, people say that is this anti-globalization? Is this against free trade, right? Nobody questions that if my company ShareChat, if they wanted to go to China and build an app to compete with ByteDance, forget about the money, can they do it? They can't. They're not allowed to, right? And that should have been the basic principle for Indian government to have acted like 6 years ago or 10 years ago to not allow these companies to come into India, right? I mean, that should be the principle. I mean, it's sadly only security, which doesn't give me great hopes of similar things being done in the future also, right? Whatever will happen, if at all will happen for security, that too late. The other point I want to make is that there are regulated concerns, things like in insurance, for example. Now you will not be comfortable if a foreign app, like the fashion apps, like there are a lot of fashion apps which are very, very poor quality stuff and you can't even return, right? When you buy from these foreign apps, will you buy insurance from a foreign app? You wouldn't, right? You wouldn't trust them to fulfill. You wouldn't trust them to give you a refund if something happens. Indian government has regulated. You need to have a mandatory Indian large family as a partner with sizable capital requirements and all of that, right? So I think at some point the government has to come up with regulations, right? Even some countries may still be outside that. Has to come with regulations saying that, form a company in India, which is what RBI told WhatsApp. Hire a CEO, put capital, store data in India, and make sure that we can go after you, right? I mean, RBI can catch hold of a bank and shut down a full-fledged bank, right? I mean, it happened right in front of our eyes, right? I mean, we saw what happened with a very large bank, right? So I think that control of the rule of law has to be built in any entity which wants to service India. I mean, social media is not just for fun. I mean, the impact these apps can have on the for example, on the polls, for example, on public policy, public perception, how people spend is significant. I mean, it's probably people spend more time in social media than they spend on malls. And look at how much of a heavy debate we have on foreign retail versus Indian retail, right? That's like a heavily debated subject. Government is doing a whole lot to protect Indian companies there, but in something far more important and far more consequential to the future of the country, we are not paying attention. Right? So I hope that the government actually focuses on the economic reciprocity and long-term impacts of these things. Sorry, I'm taking disproportionate time.
No, absolutely, Anand. Point taken on that front. Uday, you were running across one of the very large apps, Sony Live, and you had so many subscribers. What's your view on it? Because the government press release mentions about data privacy, right? And the press release talks about data privacy, but doesn't expand on it, saying that data privacy, how it is impinged, and what is wrong with it, right? What are this? So, any views on how data privacy at Sony Live you used to manage, and what should be a standard? Is there a governing standard which can be set on data privacy? Uday.
So I think I hope you can hear me. So I think the first thing in terms of anything related to data privacy or data security is the data has to be in the country. So I think fundamentally we have to have regulations around it. We have to follow the kind of regulations that probably Europe has put into place, which talks a lot about regulation of content and regulation of where the data is going to be lying. Today, you are not using these apps for only watching movies or watching shows or only entertainment. A lot of these apps are now storing financial information. If we're going to have critical financial information, medical information, health records, all of this, we can't have this data lying outside India. And with mobile phones, the way they are capturing location, the way they are capturing, various other pieces of what you're doing, I think this information cannot be sitting outside in any situation. So it has to be within the purview of the country for those security purposes. And I think the government is justified in today's environment to be able to, put their foot down and say, this is an important piece for the country. We need to put this in place. Now, do you first put a huge regulation in place, spend a lot of time and try and build that, get consensus and build a couple of years to do that? Or, make an example and say, we will put our foot down and get this done. So today, the government, given the entire security situation on the borders, has really taken action against a few selected apps. So my recommendation to anybody who's running apps which are, owned by foreign companies and owned by, foreign entities is make sure your data is sitting in India. Because if your data is sitting in India and you've got a company which is registered in India and you've got people and infrastructure in India, you're that much more protected compared to a company which is in the gray area of keeping content and keeping data outside. So, that I think is the basic benchmark that we need to set in place. I think at some point the IT Act must take that into consideration and put that out there.
The same
Sajid,
today banking financial institutions are mandated to keep data in India.
Absolutely.
the same needs to be applied as what Anand mentioned with
Absolutely.
the regulator side. So that's what. So that
Yeah.
can begin across.
So I think that's the lowest common denominator for doing business in India. That you have to ensure that your data and your systems and your infrastructure is
Sure.
in India. Otherwise, there is no reason for you to be an Indian company being able to access India.
Sure, got you. Ninad, coming to you, you mentioned about soft power. Today, Vijay Shekhar Sharma, founder of Paytm, called this as a bold step in national interest and step towards Atmanirbhar app ecosystem, right? He talks about time for the best Indian entrepreneurs to come forward and build the best by Indians for Indians. And he speaks in, writes about it, saying that भारत की digital क्रांति है. What's your view? You have been evaluating so many startups. Is this really a step towards digital kranti? Ninad, you are on mute. 1 second. Ninad, you are on mute. Yeah, go ahead. Now you go ahead.
Yeah, I would say it is a step in that direction and a huge leap, if not a step. Because now, for any person, some of these apps are phenomenally successful in India. They've gone to tier two cities, they've gone to people who really did not have as much access or did not have that 15 second of fame. So people know the business model now. It is easily possible for Indian companies. There's nothing to stop Indian entrepreneur now to go down that route and exactly capture the space which has now been vacated. So yes, in a sense, it is Kranti. Is it the ultimate one? I think it's a great journey towards that. But I do agree with him that it is really in that direction.
Sanjay, I had a comment there. For fintech companies, demonetization was a big moment. For education companies, COVID was a big moment. For edtech companies, online education companies, and I think for social media companies, this is the big moment, right?
Great, absolutely.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
looks like
beautifully put.
we haven't been able to sleep since yesterday night. After this call at 9 o'clock, I have a board meeting of one of our companies, and we are in hyperactive mode, right? And Pranav is invested in many of these companies. I'm sure he's also in a hyperactive mode. When you asked me today about the call, I wasn't really like, then finally, oh, Sanjay bhai ka call. So
Thank you, Anand, for sharing your time. You have known Vijay Shekhar Sharma very closely. What's your view? I mean, he has been funded by Chinese companies. Where do you stand? And you made a tweet about Paytm being an Indian company. Why
yeah,
about it?
yeah, Sanjay, Paytm has been funded by Chinese companies, right? I mean, think about it. Well, okay, who will fund? Vijay Shekhar Sharma, thankfully, is not like some of the very well-known businessmen of India, right? He
Sure.
didn't go and dupe a few banks to fund his company. No, he could have done that, right? I mean, Paytm is a very well-known company, and for him to borrow a few $1 billion from banks wouldn't be difficult, right? I mean, what do you need to do? You just need to produce a few fake documents, right? And the bankers are very more than willing in the country to help you as a businessman. So I think for a entrepreneur, typically in the startup world, as you know, we rarely have unethical founders, right? For a founder to look clean, genuine money, you have to go somewhere to find a source. Now, if you are based in a tiny country like Singapore, the first help and the largest help comes to you from the sovereign funds, right? I mean, we have no such mechanism here.
Sure.
People went to the capital that was available. And by the way, when people say China and all, the current dispensation for the last 6 years has actively encouraged Chinese players to come into India. I mean, the entire mobile hardware ecosystem was handed over to the Chinese players on a platter, right? We were welcoming them. Now, if Vijay ended up taking money from some of those people, you can't hold that against Vijay or anybody else, right? I mean, founders didn't know. On
Sure.
the contrary, and why is it Indian? We talked about it, right? That the acid test is the CEO in India? Are they filing income tax in India? Are there employees in India? Can you stop them? If the Indian government wants to, they can go and catch hold of Vijay and put him into jail. They might have already put him a few times. I mean, so many people like Ola and eBay and Make My Trip, all of these founders find them in the way of the law for good or bad reasons all the time, right? And you can control them. But if you look, Sanjay, at what happened in the curious case of Twitter CEO, where the CEO was called by the Indian Parliament, right? If you remember, right? I mean, Indian Parliament had to copy US Parliament, right? And nothing happened, right? The gentleman actually visited India after that, completely forgot. The Parliament also forgot that this guy is supposed to come and meet the Parliament. Nothing happened, right? I mean, so I think it's an Indian company. More importantly, what are Indian founders supposed to do, right? People also say that Flipkart founders shouldn't have sold out. क्या करेगा यार, मतलब the point is कि in India you build a company painfully. So by the way, Paytm built the entire payment market, right? 2016 November, nobody believed that small merchants are willing to use the online payment system. But today, what's happening to Paytm? Google and WhatsApp are coming and discounting. Google is already discounting very heavily. Amazon is discounting very heavily. And the Indian government is watching peacefully, right? I mean, there is no protection. We don't even have a competition commission which will, interestingly, if you try to do this in steel, right? Steel manufacturer, anybody try to do even 1 rupee ka difference, all the steel manufacturers will be up in arms saying anti-dumping, right? But there is no anti-dumping in the startup world. Amazon can go and dump on the head of Flipkart, and Google can dump on the head of Paytm. And all of us, instead of actually supporting the entrepreneur, we are saying, dekho, he's a sellout. He's not able to manage. And interestingly, Sanjay, we have this wrong thing about, Google ka UI is better and Amazon ka UI is better. It's not a UI which is better. Flipkart company Myntra has 10x better UI than Amazon. The UI is actually only in form of discount. We go to Amazon because discount is better. That's the reality.
Sanjay, I just want to make a point here. Sanjay, I just want to make a point here. We have to figure out what's the size of the Indian market also from the startup point of view. When you look at it, it's adding to what Anand is saying, just significantly much smaller than most other markets. Today, the entire funding in the Indian ecosystem is about $7 billion a year. Entire startup funding is about $7 billion a year.
No, 14 billion last year.
14 billion, that's what Pranav is.
Okay, so compared to the 300 billion across the world. So out of the 300 billion across the world, your 10, 12, 14 billion number.
Third largest.
To China, which is probably about 100 billion. So, there has to be, you have to take money from where there is excess capital. There has been one round of huge IPOs and exits, and there are 1,200 to 1,500 large VCs sitting with a lot of cash in China wanting to invest in the next big market. Why should not it be India? The question is, today, will that be possible? Will that not be possible? In the political scenario, will that possible or not possible?
Uday, you are right. I mean, would you want?
So let me come back on that point. I want to talk to Pranav. Will this ban hold? Is this constitutional? Now, if you look into TikTok, had a ban, I think last year or a couple of years back, right? With Madras High Court for a few days last year, but it came back soon after court vacated it, right? So this action is however more sweeping and impacts so many numbers of app. The ban has been put under the so-called national security context, right? What happens this time? Will this ban hold constitutionally?
Yeah. So Sanjay, I learned this the hard way. I spent some time in the US. I studied there. So someone very important there told me how this whole thing works. There are only two things any company cannot do in order to stay alive in another country, right? Okay. It cannot dodge taxes and it cannot threaten national security.
Okay.
Now you can see, for example, TikTok has a lot of quote unquote lewd content. Okay. And Tamilians are, no offense to them, but particularly sensitive when you put one actress or another actress and make some meme and some fancy video shaking some leg here, there, whatever. Fine. Someone will go to court, someone will have a stay, some order will come. Those are easier things to get by. Those are all sentiments. But when it comes to national security or dodging taxes, no matter which company you are, you try this in any country in the world, the entire apparatus of that country can be used against you. Now, in this case, what is very clear to us is the government has taken a stand. This is a national security issue, right? This, I think, is one of the strongest ways to make something permanent. Now, can they reverse this in 3 or 4 years? Can we come to an agreement? For example, will we make a deal to have capital come in from China? Will we have anti-dumping regulations? Will we have a competition commission? I think a ban like this suddenly brings them to the table, because even China understood that it cannot. One thing that hits it hard is market access. That is how it's built its entire 100-year vision. If you read President Xi's document, which he released in 2017, the one thing they cannot do without is market access. That they're very clear. Right? Even the Belt and Road Initiative was to strengthen market access. So I think yes, this is India's strongest possible move, and I think it will bring more parties to the table. So I'm pretty sure if it gets worked out, they will have a slow easing off, and I think we can expect a lot more reform after this.
We have got some audience questions coming up. Do you agree Indian investors are less risk than foreign investors? Anyone would like to take this kind of stuff?
So I would love to take this on. So Indian investors, and I'm talking you purely as an individual investor who's an angel investor, takes on the maximum amount of risk, not institutional private money. And I'm saying, for us, it's almost strange that we do this because it's just stacked up against us because the taxation is high. There is just no window of exit. There is no formal, the funnel of lots of angel investors, then culminating into exits. We just don't have the depth in that ecosystem today. We don't have the entire environment which actually takes care of startups. So we don't have enough accelerators. We don't have enough angels. We don't have enough early stage funds. And late stage is a very, very late situation, and most of them then get into some Chinese fund or.
Uday, are we going to take risk as an Indian investors in comparison to foreign investors? Right.
That's so. Yeah.
It has to happen. My point is, it has to happen. It's a matter of time. It only has to see a few successes, and people will come on the table.
Sanjay. We have been taking risks for last. You and I, Sanjay bhai and I have been like the oldest angel investors in the market, right?
Absolutely.
And we've been taking risks with personal money and people's money now, thankfully, over the years, all the time. There are times when we have to go and tell our investors, we will look stupid. Please let us be stupid, because this is a venture capital fund, and that's how we raise money, right? We have to, at the cost of. In 2013, I was telling you, Sanjay, that when I did my first social media company, the founders actually could not even code well, right? They could not design well, right? And the people were right. Yeah, you guys don't know how to design. But the question is that some of these problems go away with time, right? And a growing country like India, the market will, even if it is not today, it will expand. Even if there are no big VCs not today, they will come, right? This is about faith. And the fact of the matter is that there are enough exits. One, Flipkart has already paid for 3 years of venture capital investment in the country, right? So things will happen. This is long-term money. We have probably completed one cycle at best of venture capital investment.
Exactly.
Second cycle has just begun, which is very early days. These things are the work of a lifetime, right? This startup ecosystem which is building the entire digital footprint of the country. And I think we will probably be able to produce results only probably significant amount of time. I can tell you one thing, Sanjay bhai. In the next 10 years, some of the largest companies in the country will be companies which were startups earlier, right? That's not a fact. Flipkart, which was sold 3-4 years ago, is already a Nifty 50 company, right? I think if all of these companies were to list, they will be probably half of the Sensex in next 10 years. For sure.
Anand, what can we create as an environment to get them to list? The problem is they don't list.
You were right. You were right about tax structure. It's about anti-dumping, right? Why do we make losses? Because people come and dump on the market, right? That's why we make losses.
So Pranav had shared a couple of notes about case for domestic capital and stuff. But Pranav, for today's session, what do you think? A lot of unicorns, I think 30 plus unicorns in India are actually
34.
funded. Chinese VCs and
That's
Chinese
right.
money? What happens to them? Will government take some action? What's your view? How do you see that thing playing out in the venture ecosystem where Chinese have poured so much money?
Yeah. So look, Sanjay, honestly, the government of India is not silly. And I have to tell you from my personal experience, the government of India is deeply concerned about its startup ecosystem. They are not in a position where they can say all this doesn't matter, chota company hai, throw them out the window, national security. That is not what's happening. The government is very clear. We have to have a framework that is sustainable, that applies to all color of money coming into India from outside India, right? So far, they have not built a common framework, or they have not enforced it. It's true in both cases. So what I am seeing immediately happen is, first, we have to be very clear. These are Chinese companies operating in India, the Xiaomi's and the Hellos and all these apps. So that is the first immediate zone of concern. As far as capital coming from China is concerned, I think there's going to be very soon a set of very clear regulations on what it means to be a controlling versus non-controlling investor. For example, if a Chinese company or fund owns more than, say, 33% of a company, and they control, say, 33% of the board, and something absurd like, for example, board meetings are happening in Hangzhou or Shenzhen, that is a very valid concern. It's no longer a clear case of they don't have controlling power, right? So I
Yeah.
think these kind of boundaries will be set up very soon. I don't think all Indian companies have to be concerned right away, right? So, for example, Baiju is a standout company in India. He's the biggest education company in the world. No one thought an Indian company will be the number one in that category globally. You always assumed it would be Chinese or American, right? But he has Tencent on the cap table, and Tencent is single digit ownership. Can anyone argue that Baidu is a Chinese company? No way, right? They can never argue that, right? So I think there are very clear examples that some things make sense, some things don't. As far as investments are concerned, I don't think unicorns need to panic. I think there'll be a clear regime of how capital will be governed going forward. So I think we have to be clear about Chinese companies and Chinese apps versus Chinese capital, which will have the same rules applied as any other foreign money coming.
Sanjay, I want to talk to you about foreign ownership in Indian companies. RBI
Sure.
designated ICICI Bank as one of the three banks which are systematically critical banks, right? ICICI Bank has 43% FII ownership. FII
Okay.
ownership means unknown foreign ownership. Nobody actually knows who's the underlying beneficiary. It can come from any country, right? It could be Chinese also, it could be Saudi also, it could be even Pakistani for all we know. Genuinely, it also might be Indian, by the way. Right? It's for foreign money. So,
Yeah.
but it's a foreign ownership, right? And that is the largest block of shareholding, right? In fact, Indian DIIs and Indian public, they own less equity in ICICI Bank, right? It's the largest chunk. But the bank is purely an Indian bank, right? So I think there is no point or merit in cutting out capital from any country entirely, right? That's not required and not needed. I think, of course, at the same time, if we don't want a lot of foreign capital, if we want our own people to benefit, then the government has to encourage LIC to put money into, or the private insurance companies to put money into startups. There are so many banks. I mean, the question is, how much has State Bank of India done for startups, and how much has life insurance company done for startups? And there's so many vehicles and pools of money which we have to pool in, right? Including large wealth of HNI money, which can come back with right tax structures.
Sure. So, Nina, coming to you in terms of the current this ban which has happened across, are we sending out bad signals to Chinese investors and saying that you are not welcome in India? And the China today foreign ministry has spoken about saying that they are strongly concerned, and government has to take up the responsibility to uphold the legal rights of international investors, including Chinese ones. That's what the foreign ministry of China has spoken about. What's your view on this? Are we sending out bad signals to the global community?
This move by the government is interesting and very tactical. They have said these are companies with apps and they compromise national security. They have not said that all Chinese investments are bad. They have not said, everything from China we are going to ban. And they cannot, because India is a signatory to WTO, where we cannot block goods or services from a country, because that will lead to another kind of litigation in WTO. Investments from neighboring countries, they said, will go through additional screening. But in terms of services, they have taken a very specific view of the specific apps for specific reasons. So it's not a general omnibus ban saying that investments are not going to happen. Obviously, the implication is that, as Pranav mentioned, I think, about controlling and versus non-controlling is going to be the critical part. So if there is a non-controlling stake, I don't think there will be any problem in neither now or in future. This is only to apps because of data privacy and national security. That's a limited window at this point of time. But yes, it can be expanded towards controlling stake. But if it's a non-controlling stake, I do not foresee any problem at all.
Okay, awesome. On the closing comments, Anand, if you were to give out three short-term advice to startup entrepreneurs in this related, ban, what would be your three-step advice or three advice which can help them take advantage of this ban or work for their own startup?
So, Sanjay, one thing that I would advise people is to not do shortcuts or jugaad, right? Build products for the long run, build good quality products. Right now, they should launch quickly as much as possible. Second is don't build just to raise marketing money, right? That's not the objective. You will, if you want to build a social product, it will have to be viral. Any product which cannot grow without spending money on digital marketing, right, will not survive. Right? There is not enough money in the world to build a social product or a consumer product by simply purely spending marketing money. Right? Product has to grow on its own virally, not just word of mouth. You have to build virality. Third thing is that you will have to focus on monetization earlier. Right? So in the last decade, the focus was to say we'll build and we'll grow big and then we'll look at profits. Right? I think in India, micro payments, smaller payments are already happening. There are apps which are charging 200 rupees a year for subscription. So many people are paying for Hotstar subscription, right? So many people are paying for Amazon Prime subscription. So why will these people not pay for your app, right? Unless you are a Twitter, right? I mean, chances are that your consumer app is probably something that you can charge for. So you build for the ability to show and actually able to charge. Social media products are expensive, marketing is expensive, hosting is expensive, cloud expenses are pretty high. So I would say this is what people should build for. My biggest advice would be launch quickly. Without really waiting for money. Most social apps can be launched. Thankfully don't need a lot of money.
Sure. Thank you so much, Anand. Now that brings me to Uday. You have been a proponent of early, kind of app economy or entertainment and OTT play. And what's your view? Do people really pay for subscription? And do you think India has a market where, what Anand mentioned about subscription, is this real? I mean, people can make money and can startups charge users?
I think if you've been through the phase of free viewability, so I think we go through a phase. So there was a phase of free content. There was a phase of ad-funded models where people were getting used to what happens. They were getting used to what kind of content is there. I think there is a layer out there which is ready to pay for premium content. How many users are there? There are probably about 40-50 million users, or if you stretch it in terms of a lower price product, probably about 70-80 million users who are ready to pay a significant amount of money on a monthly basis for consuming entertainment content, for consuming publishing content or news or whatever. I think that economy is now becoming significant, and subscription led businesses are going to be significantly large at this high end of the market. So if you're looking at the top 30 million consumers or the premium end of the users, there is a subscription economy that can be built. If you're looking for a retail, if you're looking for a larger user base and you're looking for a Bharat-led product, I think there is still time for that. We will take some more time before we build reliable payment systems, friction-free payment systems to be able to collect seamlessly on a month-on-month basis. My guess is today there is enough momentum to build a subscription business, whether it is in entertainment, whether it is in healthcare, whether it is in publishing, news, education. Education, by example, the whole industry is built around it. So my guess is there are green shoots, really strong green shoots coming out there, and it's visible that we can build very, very profitable businesses.
Sure. Pranav, coming to you on closing comments, what would be your advice for startup founders? What they should be doing in these times?
Yeah, good question, Sanjay. I think even we as early investors were a little frustrated that there were certain no-go areas in India. No one wants to fund the next browser to compete with the UC browser. No one wants to compete with those fashion apps. No one wants to compete with the video chat or social sharing platforms. So there were all these no-go areas for us as early stage investors. I think you and Anand in particular will know what I'm talking about. No one wanted to take those risks. Now with a move like this, of course, there are many negatives, and we've discussed this already. But the positive is now suddenly all the no-go areas are gone, right? Suddenly a lot of our negative lists are redundant. So I think this is a great time to reassess as investors what we should be looking at, and an even better time for founders to say, "Fantastic, let's take this plunge." These kind of opportunities don't come too often. It is a generational chance to build valuable IP out of India now. And the good news is the market's already aware. TikTok's made 150 million, 200 million Indians aware of what the power of video looks like. Hello has done it. So many of these Chinese apps have done it. So the market education is done for us. The carpet has been laid. The foundations have been built. Now we need to construct quickly. So I think it's a very exciting time. I don't think any of us should think about slowing down.
Awesome. That was quite a positive note. Ninad, what's your view on the closing comment? What startup founders and you as an investor, early stage, what you would be doing across?
Sure. So, I think the learning is for startup founders is that the business model is known, that these apps have shown that you have to focus on regional markets. I'm a big fan of regional markets. You have to go down that track, and the market is now vacated. So the tracks are laid, the train is not there. Build the train and go on it fast.
Awesome. Uday, your closing comments, finally, advice to startup founders. What do you think they should be building based on your experience on, the digital app economy?
So I was just doing the math, and there are 150 to 200 million people who are probably spending half an hour, 30 minutes, 40 minutes on TikTok. Just do the math. People will have that much free time now. Go and entertain them. There is a vacuum out there for 150 million people for about an hour a day or 40 minutes a day. It's a huge opportunity to create something very, very valuable. There's enough and more investors in India who will be ready to back you on this dais. I can see 4 of them. So go out and build it. There is money there's a huge pot of gold at the end of the tunnel there. So there is excitement out there. My only caution is I hope this doesn't get U-turned in a couple of days or doesn't go back to where we were. This should be a strategic move by the government of India. This should be directionally. I think we are all with the government to take the right moves to develop the Indian economy and to be Atmanirbhar. I think the idea is this should go on and build a great ecosystem for the entrepreneurs in India.
Awesome. Thank you so much on that positive note. Hopefully, Indian government continues with this digital kranti. Thank you, Anand, for joining on a short notice. Thank you, Pranav, for your valuable views. Uday and Ninad, joining on a short notice and discussing across the virtual strike, Chinese app ban impact, and its legality. Thank you so much, folks. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.